Okay, so welcome to the to what we hope is going to be the meetup for tonight for the Vancouver Power BI and Modern Excel user group. I'm still waiting for my feature speaker to show up. So if that doesn't happen, we're going to come up with something. We'll have some fun. Maybe we'll talk some monkey tools or something like that. But for right now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just trying to get all of my stuff set up so I know what's actually happening and who's being here. There we are. Awesome. Okay. Cool. So the agenda for today, we are hoping that Alex will actually make it here for us and will be presenting his dashboard cemetery walk. If not, we will reschedule that for another time, but bear with us. Hopefully it happens. The Vancouver Power BI user group, as most of you know, is sponsored by Skillwave. That is the training company that I run with my colleague Matt Allington, where we actually teach people how to use Excel and Power BI in awesome and amazing ways. Skillwave is a division of Excelguru Consulting, and that is the company that also releases Monkey Tools, which is a nice Excel add-in that allows you to build better data models faster and audit the ones that you get from others. Our next meetups that we have coming up here so 2 weeks from now on Thursday, July 20th, I'm pleased to be welcoming Parv Channa back to the platform, and he's going to be talking about exploring the next generation of ETL data flow Gen 2 in Microsoft Fabric, which, if you don't know, is sort of the new name for Power BI or Power BI for IT. It's really more about load destinations and things like that. So Parv's going to be giving us a good overview into data flow Gen 2 and how that ties in there. Our next Excel track is going to be Thursday, August 10th. And please note the time is going to be different. We are going to be working at 1 p.m. on the West Coast. And the reason being is because we've got Alan Murray from Computer Gaga. He is from London, England, and he is going to be presenting for us on Lambdas and beyond. I'm super happy to have Alan coming. And again, it's going to be earlier during the day. So 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. East Coast time, which actually may even be better for some of you joining from the East Coast anyway. So just keep in mind that little part, but there we go. So the other thing that I just wanted to make mention of really quickly here, with Skillwave being the title sponsor, is that we do have, starting August 9th, a new semester coming up of the Excel Fundamentals Bootcamp. If you are looking for either yourself or someone on your team to go through and learn some of the core Excel skills that are actually needed out there, including Power Query, pivot tables, data visualization, this is a fantastic program to do it. It is a coached program. We have 32 hours of training and coaching involved in it. There's up to 46 hours of continuous Ask Ken sessions that are held throughout the life of the product as well, plus access to the recording archives and a whole bunch of other stuff. This is going to be kicking off, as I say, on August 9th, so you definitely would want to check that out if you're interested. Also, our self-service BI bootcamp is also going to be kicking off again on August 9th as well. We do both of these sessions kick off at the same time. This again has over 40 hours of training and coaching, 46 hours of Ask Me Anything sessions. And new to this program is we've also added an annual license for our Monkey Tools software is included in the price now as well. We believe so strongly in it, and this is something that we think you're going to actually get a lot of use out of. So that's a cool little addition there, and the link to check that out and register is at skw-t.com/ssbi. Every single VanPUG meetup is recorded, of course, and hosted on the Skillwave YouTube channel. It usually takes me about 24 to 48 hours in order to download and do the post-processing on the video and then get it uploaded. But we will post on the meetup channel when it's ready. So just keep in mind that they are there. And if you've missed any of our last meetups, you can always go back and check those out at our Skillwave YouTube channel. If you like bite-sized training, we've got some great videos called Monkey Shorts that you can find on the Skillwave YouTube channel as well. Interestingly enough, one of the ones we're featuring today is using Power Query and IntelliSense. I got a comment from my friend Jeff Weir of how frustrating this is, and actually linking in one of the Power BI or Power Query team to ask when this was going to be fixed, and the answer sort of came in, well, whenever we harmonize our experience between Power Query Online and whatnot. But it's great to see that some of these things, as well as inspiring people and teaching them things, are also getting some pushback to Microsoft to fix some of them as well. So if you're interested, you should definitely check these things out. Go and have a look. They are less than 3 minutes of technical content each, so nice and quick to consume. The last thing that I'm going to throw out there is that if you would like to come and speak at our user group, we would love to have you. It's always great to have new speakers that show up on our channel. Just fill out this little survey at excelguru.ca/speak@VanPUG. We'll get in touch and we will get you on our stage. And on that note, I am looking at my list of attendees here, and I don't see. I also see that somehow I managed to get myself muted. So I don't see Alex in our list of attendees for today. So unfortunately, that means my featured speaker isn't here right now. We do have a call out to him to figure out what's going on. But in the meantime, I'll tell you what we're going to do is I don't want to short you guys on content. I want to make sure that you actually have something here. So I'm just going to go and lead a general discussion on some of the stuff that I've been working on and some of the different features. This is not scripted, so it could be a complete and total mess, so bear with me. But if anybody has questions as I go along, let me just go and fix this to get my my chat window and whatnot. Oh yeah, link of the bootcamp on the chat. That I can definitely do. Hang on one second here. So this is the SSBI bootcamp, right? It's always weird. Why does Teams do strange things? It indented it for me, but that is the link for the SSBI version, and I will give you the link to the fundamentals version as well. These links, by the way, are all included in the chat that we actually post up online as well. So they're posted on the meetup group. Okay, so let's go and take a look at some Monkey Tools features. If anybody has any general questions, I can sort of do this as a general ask anything type session as well. Like I say, I've got nothing prepared for this because I was sort of expecting to have a speaker in place. But you know, we'll have a little experiment and a little bit of fun here. So for those of you who aren't aware of what Monkey Tools is, Monkey Tools is an Excel add-in that is available from monkeytools.ca. And the purpose of this is basically to make you more efficient when you're actually working with Excel. And I'm going to go and just dig through and dig up some demos real quick here on some of the components that I actually work with. And I'll show you some kind of neat things that we can do here. So let me show you first a demo of something called our Bilbio Monkey. So this is a relatively new feature. Control-T is the best, absolutely. It helps when I double click on the file and it actually opens. There we go. So this is an example of a forecasting schedule that I have done a lot when I've been actually working on forecasting new unit sales or budgets for future years. The concept is basically like this. I've got a 22 forecast of things that, or not forecast, this is actual results of what we actually did for units sold. And I want to forecast next year's, or sales, I guess, for lack of a better term. So the concept that I'm looking for here is that I'm forecasting a global increase of 5% across the board, but I want to be able to override some of these things individually. So if there's no override, I want to use 5%. If there is an override, let's say that I want 0% on this one here for some reason. If there is an override entered into these cells, I want to use that rate instead. And this has got a somewhat complicated formula in order to do. I've written it a lot though, so I've actually managed to store it in my tools so that I can make this a little bit easier. It's going to start up front here though with a really basic example. The first thing I want to do is run a series of month ends across the top. And the formula to do this is actually really, really easy. Okay, so I can just go and write equals EO month, pick up my start date, comma 1, and this is going to give me the new month name. But what if I have decided for some reason that I want to store this in my tools, and I have. So I'm going to show you right now. I'm going to highlight this entire range. I'm going to go right click here, insert from Bilbio Monkey, and I have a formula for end of next month relative. So I've actually stored this inside a database that goes with Monkey Tools. So this pops up and says, okay, cool. You want to apply the formula to the selected range. What's your base month? So I'm going to choose this cell here. And how many months do you want to change? We'll say 1. Hit inject, and it goes and it runs the formula all the way across. And I'll show you what that formula looks like inside Monkey Tools in just a second. This is really easy. And honestly, I'm not going to generally use something like Monkey Tools for doing this. It's just a very, very quick demo of how this actually sort of puts together and actually has an interface. This formula is more complicated. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go right click here. And I'm going to go with insert from Bilbio Monkey formula. And on this one, I'm going to choose this one here, volume forecast with override. So you can see this one has a few more different pieces here. It's picked up the range that it's actually being applied to, and it says, where is your global increase? Well, that's 5%. What's the monthly override? And you'll notice here that this one was fully absolute. This one's relative, okay? And the monthly volume is going to come from here. And when I go and inject, it actually runs the formula all the way through here and actually works beautifully. The formula behind the scenes that it's just been injected is this. Okay, so it uses a let function in order to generate this whole thing and puts the appropriate pieces in place. Okay, so like I say, I use this formula often when I'm actually building up these schedules. If I'm building one-time work, I don't generally store it, but trying to remember how to write this every single time, it's kind of a pain. And because I use it often, I wanted to actually hold on to it. So what I've done is I've actually taken it and stored it inside this Bilbio Monkey that we actually release in Monkey Tools. I'll go and show you the formula pattern for what we actually have here. So this is the volume forecast with override. I'm just going to hold control down and roll this up. And if we go and take a look, actually here, let me expand the formula bar and just show you what the real formula looks like versus this. It looks like this. So we've got vol global. You can see that here. You can also see that we have something else inside this. And what this is this is prompting, where I grabbed this original formula that looked like this and then said, hey, I want to put in some variables in place. Now, the way that this works is you simply find the component that you want to replace. Let me just go and grab this one here. So originally this was $7. I would have copied this out of something else. I can grab that, right click on it, say add a new prompt. I actually want to pick up a cell reference that is fully absolute. And at this point, I could go in and put in the, enter your global volume or whatever you actually want to have in place here. Okay, so terrible spelling, but it actually goes and puts a tag in here. Now we have some nomenclature around why these tags are in place and what they actually mean. These letters combinations all mean different things for us, but we actually use those when you're actually injecting something into your workbook later in order to put in your absolute and relative references. Now, I'm not going to save this one. I'm going to jump away and come back here just so that we can actually see it. So there you go. That's what that final version looked like there. The end of next month relative looked like this. The base formula. See, let me just go copy this guy here. Control C that one. Control C this one. There we go. So the base formula of this, when I put in EO month, was something like this, A5, 1. And I said, okay, that's cool, but I want this to be tagged with some variables in here. So here we go. Right click, add a new prompt. This particular one here is going to be a fully relative reference. And we'll go and we'll put in the choose base month. There we go. And then this one here, this was going to be a number. So we right click, add new prompt. It's going to be a value. And at this point in time, this was number of months is what I chose. So it's just that easy to actually go and tag things. At least it is when you have a pro license for Monkey Tools. If you have a free license, this all still works. You just have to write the tags manually, which is kind of gross and nasty, but it will still work and they'll still get injected into the workbook nicely. I use Bilbio Monkey for storing a variety of different things. I have some Lambda patterns that I like to be able to inject into my workbooks really easily. Something for pulling back worksheet names, file paths, file names, things like that. I never remember how to write this to begin with, so it's really, really nice to be able to just inject this into the workbook directly through Monkey Tools. We can also do more complicated things, like here's a month-to-date measure pattern, which goes and says how many months do we want to subtract. And you'll notice we use the same tag twice in this case. And that's because every time you define a new tag, you can use an existing prompt somewhere else. So this has got quite a few different ones in there. And if I had a data model here, I could inject this into the workbook and it actually smart reads. If I've tagged and say, give me a fully qualified column, it'll give me a list of all the fully qualified columns. If I have, tables, it'll give me just tables and such as well. So works quite nicely to actually build a really helpful little model. Actually, I'll demonstrate that in just a bit as well. Let me try another one here. I'll show you just sort of some of the fun pieces around this. I'm going to show you a training component that I use for one of my courses. So this is where we actually read from Power BI, or sorry, via Power Query, we actually pull from a SQL database. So I'm going to go into Bilbio Monkey, and I'm going to go into this loaded pencil here, and I'm going to pull back this query. So this is a Power Query that I actually built manually, and then I copied the M code and saved it here. Okay, so to do that, I added a new query, set up all the information here, and hit save. And that generated this. So what I want to do with this now is I actually want to run this particular query. So I'm going to inject it, and it says, what do you want to call it? Where do you want to load it to? So we'll say inject, and it's now going to go and run the query for the 2009 sales summary for the location, which is called the squints, okay, inside my my particular data setup here. So here we go. Take a look. It's coming. Just got to wait for it to load because, of course, it is coming from SQL Server and Teams is active. And at that point, what we can do is we can now go and show the peak, and you can see that we've got 2009 sales for the squints location. So this is cool, but what if I want to reuse this, but I want to tag this and set it up with something else on a regular basis? So here's how this is going to work, is I'm going to grab this entire block of code. I'm going to come over to this one here that's called annual location summary. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save this and I'm going to update it. So right now, the annual location summary, that's odd. Okay, I got a bug in there that I need to deal with here, and I've also got a mic to mute as well from someone. There we go. All right, there we are. I'm just going to mute that one off. Awesome. So let me close this and come back in. I just want to make sure that I don't have a duplicate in this case. I do have a duplicate. All right, awesome. Let me go and get rid of the duplicate. There we go, delete that one, and here we are. Okay, so we're back here. My annual location sales summary at this point is still tagged to 2009 and the squints. So again, I'm gonna go and prompt this one out. So I'm gonna right click on this one here, add a new prompt here. This one is gonna be some text in this particular case. Actually, I'm gonna go with the value, and we will say enter a year. Go. So we get the little tag. You'll notice that we can right click and we can reuse that if I need to, so that I don't have to enter it again. I don't in this case. What I want to do is I want to enter some text here for the location. So I'm going to go right click, add some text. And this one here is going to say enter a location. Okay. We'll say okay. I'll just update this. And now when I want to go and actually inject this into the workbook, you'll see the effect of it. We inject, says, what do you want to call it? The annual location sales summary. Do you want to load it to connection only or the data model? Connection only is fine. Actually, I'm going to load this to the data model just because I want to get the preview to come through quickly. We're going to go with the 2013 sales for the tax evader location. And when we hit inject, it will now go and inject that query. So you can see that based on what I tagged here, it actually comes back and it gives me the smart prompting on what's actually going on behind the scenes. And then once it actually does its load, could have sworn that I made that change. I'm gonna have to look at that. If I go and take a look at it, you can see it's 2013 for tax evader. I'm definitely gonna have to go and check back and make sure that that actually took, because something doesn't feel right to me there. So, always great when you do a demo live, it's not scripted and something goes a little bit sideways thing. Anyhow, so it's kind of an interesting little component here, I think, for people here. The concept behind Bilbio Monkey is we actually store query patterns. You'll notice that, I mean, I run the Skillwave business, so we actually have a bunch of Skillwave queries that we run for pulling our own sales out because I need to do this on a regular basis. And the query behind the scenes is actually quite complicated for that. So it saves me from having to actually go and copy and paste it out of another workbook. I've got it right here inside a database that I can actually pull anytime I want. We have DAX measures that we can go and insert formulas. VBA we can store. We can't insert into your workbook. I have not tried to plumb that in. Office scripts, again, just acts the library to store things. We can't inject those into workbooks either. But the Lambda functions we absolutely can. So, you know, if I have a workbook that's saved, I can inject these things and actually pull them back and get some information out of them. So that's one feature that I think is quite useful to anybody, honestly, that's working with Excel. If you tend to do some work where you reuse different things, you may find that useful. So I'm going to go and hit close on this one right now. Like I say, as we go along, if anybody has any questions that they want to ask about these things, by all means, please ask. Don't hold them. I always love to answer things and you know, give you guys some value based on what you see here. So The next feature I'm going to show you is another relatively new function that we added. Why is my double click not working? There we go. So this is what we actually call our from table or range monkey. And I've made some enhancements to this since the first time that I actually announced it. So basically what I have here is I have some tabular data. There are no tables on this, but some of them, like this one, are actually the result of a dynamic array spill range. So if I come back over here and I hit Control T, what you'll notice, Control T is the shortcut to create a new table. And what you'll notice is that unlike Microsoft's default dialog, I allow you to name your table up front. So if I wanted to go and call this one sales, I can type the name in here right away. If I hit enter, it will now go and create that table. I also have the ability, if I want to create a connection only query to go with it immediately. And boom, here we go. Table is created. We have a connection only query. So there's two things here that are really, really important compared to the Microsoft default experience. In the default experience, what happens is you get to create your table, but you don't get to provide it a name. If you use right-click, get data from table or range, you'll notice that I have actually taken control of this one as well. So I'm going to go and call this one costs, for example. We don't have the ability here to actually go and create a connection only query. And the reason being is because when we say, okay, this is actually going to launch us directly into Power Query so we can make changes. The big difference here though, if you were using Microsoft's default instance, this would say table 1. You would build your query, save it, go back. If you're cleaning up your stuff to try and make it, robust so you can audit it later, you would then change your table name and break your queries. We actually allow you to fix these things so that you can actually name them up front so that things don't break. So, Jack, I spend most of my time in Power BI, not Excel. You poor thing. I'm sad for you, but okay, fair enough. Would you show some examples of how Monkey Tools would assist me there? Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely do that. Bear with me on that. I will do so. Let me finish this one first here. One interesting component around the Control T functionality on this. Microsoft tries to identify whether or not your data has headers. If it comes in and it's all numeric, it will not check this box for you. We check this box by if it's all text, it won't check that box. We do this 100% of the time because we believe that 99.9% of data does have headers, and if it doesn't, you can uncheck this box yourself. So that's a little bit of a change here. But we also give you the ability, if you want to set this up as a named range. So you can set it up as a range, as a workbook scoped. We can even say, hey, I want to create a connection only query. So if this is going to be something like range sales, for example, we can say okay to that, and it will actually bring in that range as well. In addition, our Control T will also recognize dynamic array spill areas. This is something actually that the Excel team just recently released into the current channel, is the ability now, hang on a second, where'd I go? Sorry. I actually did not create a connection only query. I thought I did. So I actually did exactly what I told it to, and that just wasn't what I was expecting. But here is my dynamic array range that has actually named this particular area. I can also grab my dynamic array data. There we go. So this is, let's call this one, I don't know, ARY. I'm just going to call animals. I'm not sure what I'm going to be, but you'll notice that it is a hash spill array area. Okay, I can set it up as workbook or worksheet scoped. And when I now go and say, okay, because I triggered this via get data, it is actually going to create the array and actually bring it in. Now, Microsoft just released, they made their big announcement on this this month, that they just released the ability to right click and get data from a dynamic array. It's been in the insider channel for about 6 months. I didn't actually even realize that it was released. So Monkey Tools does this, and quite frankly, in my opinion, does it better. So just something to be aware of in that area. So there we go. We have our connection only queries. All right. So these are some of the different functionalities here. Something I want you to be aware of on this one, this particular feature is available for all Monkey Tools users, whether you're on a free license, whether you're on a pro license, really doesn't matter. But if you want to turn it off because you like the classic version of Microsoft's software, I don't know why you would, but if you do, we have that option. If you go into your options monkey under global options, you can use the default Control T experience. Control L, which does the same thing as Control T, so you can actually have both experiences in place. You can provide custom prefaces, check to include the query name by default, for example, and even usually get default from table or range or insert table buttons as well. So we give you a lot of granularity to control and make this work exactly the way you want. This is the one feature that Monkey Tool overrides from Microsoft, where everything else is sort of created is an on-demand kind of insert. This is the one place that we actually take control over what Microsoft does and do something different. Okay, so let's talk about what we can do with Power BI. So Jack, it's a great question as far as what Monkey Tools does with Power BI. I'm going to be completely honest with you. This tool was designed for Excel users. It was not designed for Power BI users. Okay, so we have some components that we do actually allow to connect to a Power BI model and do some analysis and things like it. But this hasn't been the primary use case of it. In my world, I build 99.9% of my business intelligence in Excel first. If I need it to be published to Power BI for some reason, I will publish my Excel model directly from Excel into Power BI, and then I will actually build reports online. So I don't actually generally use Power BI Desktop for a lot of the work that I do. So keep that in mind as we go through here, but I will show you a couple of things where this actually can work with Power BI. And I'm going to sort of jump the gun a little bit on the way I would normally do a demo, and I'm just going to go straight there just for fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to close this workbook. I'm going to grab a new blank workbook, which I actually have right now. And I'm going to use my connection monkey here to connect to a Power BI desktop file. And you'll notice that it's going to go and ask me where my files are. So let me go into my demos, grab Power BI models, and I'm going to grab this LP Azure from SQL. So we'll go and say open. So what's going to happen here is that Monkey Tools is going to go and open the Power BI file. It's going to spin up and run the model. So you're going to see that Power BI is going to launch here in a second. But if you watch carefully, you can see that it's actually doing things in the bottom corner here. I'm just going to flip back to Excel at this point in time. The data model has been loaded. And at this point, I now have a live connection from Monkey Tools to this particular data model file. Thank you very much. Okay. So what can I do with it? I can go and take a look at the queries that are inside this. Okay, so if I go and take a look at the budgets query, this gives me an indented version of the M code in this particular case. Now, obviously, I do the majority of my work in Excel. In Excel, I can actually update this and write this back. So if I want to make light edits in here, the update button will be lit up. For Power BI, it is not, because I cannot write back to a live running Power BI model. One of the cool things about Query Sleuth is that this is a query dependency tracer. So if I go and double click on budgets, we can see all the queries that are actually feeding into budgets. We've got Azure DB, which looks like this, which pulls from a database name and database URL, which I can go back and actually find. If I look at the calendar, you can see all of the different components that are feeding into this, and I can actually walk my query chain up and down. I find this to be much more useful than the default Power Query dependency tracer that we see inside Power Query. The dependency tracer in Power Query works really well if you have about 6 queries. But once you get into a real life model that has 40 or 50 queries, it's basically like chasing a noodle through a bowl of spaghetti to try and figure out what's going on. There's no way to separate the components. There's no way to really trace things, because when you click on one table, it highlights every related table from start to finish, which makes it really difficult to actually get any useful information out of it. Okay, so it's a great exploration tool, as you say, in order to be able to do things. It's better in Excel because you can actually make updates and things like that as well. Okay, we do, for reference, we look at precedents, which is the way this is set up by default. We can also go the other way and say, give me the dependent. So if I want to see from Azure DB, for example, what's using this, I can double click on it. And I can see all the things that are actually hanging off of that. So we can go both directions on the precedent dependent chain. And for what it's worth, I actually built this because I was having a difficult challenge tracing lineage for a complicated model, because I had a client who liked to change the scope of things. And even though we'd spend a lot of time trying to hammer down what was going on things, we'd build a really complex model, and then he'd want to change something here. And you go, okay, well, this is going to potentially cascade through 15 queries. What is it potentially going to break? And this was actually what allowed me to go through and actually check these things out. We have another tool that's similar to Query Sleuth. It's called DaxSleuth. So basically, DaxSleuth is a dependency tracer for your Power Pivot Dax measures, or in this case here, we're connected to the PBIX file. So I'm actually looking at the measures that are in here. So I have a measure which is called draft sold, which has got draft beer listed here. You'll notice that we can double click on this. We also see that this is referencing the selected units measure. Okay, so that is part of this. And one of the components that I can do with this one is you'll notice that I actually can update a measure. So this is useful in the factor that I can do something like this. I can say, hey, draft beer is great, but I want to see wine. I'm going to duplicate this measure and I'm going to call this wine sold and say OK. And actually, before I click the OK button, let me just jump back over to Power BI Desktop here and go to View my data. And on my metrics table, I want you to be aware in alphabetical order, there is no wine here. Okay, we don't see anything here. So let me head back over and say OK. And it will now duplicate it. We now have a wine measure that is actually sold here. And if I go back over to Power BI Desktop, you can see that wine sold is actually here as well. So I actually can play around with measures through Power BI. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't know too many people that are going to jump on Monkey tools to go and duplicate DAX measures. There are other tools out there that do this, but the main reason this is here is because it works for Excel models, and it just happened to be easy to implement in order to actually work inside Power BI Desktop as well. So I figured, hey, you know what? If you're going to pull into it and look at this to go and explore, you know, your measure dependency chain and see what's going on, why wouldn't we give you the ability to do things like indent, unindent, flatten for reference? Basically, we'll take my burger sold and flatten it down, wrap it in the required calculate statements in order to make sure that the context transitions are going to work and all that kind of stuff along the way. And there you go. That's the fully flattened version of that particular measure to see exactly what's going on if you don't want to have it all sort of referenced through the chain. Don't know a lot of people to do that, but you can. Okay. You can unindent it. Don't know why you'd want to. You can indent it so it's a little bit more reasonable. We do use our own indenter for this. We don't borrow anybody else's, so it might look a little bit different than what you might be used to from something like DAX Studio or DAXformatter.com, just be aware. Okay, so probably the most sort of common tools, I guess, that you'll see from working with this with Power BI is the exploration of Query Sleuth, maybe a little bit more DaxSleuth. But here's where things actually get kind of interesting. With our ModelSleuth, what ModelSleuth is about is connecting to other people's files and actually getting a little bit of an analysis of what's going on inside. So if I go and take a look, for example, at the model summary report, what this will do is this is now querying the PBIX file, telling me how many tables, relationships, measures I have in there, what is the active model memory size that is running right now, how many tables are loaded to the data model versus connection only queries, for example. Is there anything that's a direct data source? You won't find this from Power BI Desktop because, of course, everything comes through Power Query. But in Excel, this could actually be different, and that is a red flag to me about things. We tell you about the relationships, the cardinalities, what the different fields are that are related, give you the summary stats of rows and column counts. We'll tell you if tables are disconnected or if they're snowflaked. And you can see all of the stats of your different columns and things like that down here, how many unique values, their data types, all the things that are important for compression to run an efficient model. I will tell you that when I go to an Ask the Expert session and somebody comes in and asks me to help me with their DAX in Power BI, the first thing that I will do is ask them to put a copy of their model on a USB stick, which I will delete afterwards. I hook Monkey Tools up to it and run this report. And I can then look at it and try and figure out if their data model is actually in good shape, or if we've got a whole bunch of calculated columns and messes and things like that. So this is a very, very useful tool to go back and get a good overview of what's actually going on. You can see we've got all the DAX expressions for our different measures. Are they used? Are they not used? Are they implicit or explicit? Because, you know, we all hate implicit measures. And we tell you about their query stats as well. This information is really, really useful from an audit perspective to understand what's going on in things, look for red flags. We also have the ability to do other things like run your memory usage report. So this will come back and actually tell me how much memory is being used by the model. Why this matters to me is because I have actually had clients that have come to me and said, look, my models are running really, really slow in Power BI Desktop. I said, okay, that's cool. Let's hook it up with Monkey Tools. We run it. And lo and behold, we find 17 different hidden date tables in the model because they happen to have 17 columns that they've never classified any calendar tables whatsoever. So making a very quick change to the model to remove the hidden date tables allows us to actually save space. And in the case of one of my clients that cut their model memory usage size down by 90%, and I'm not kidding, 90. It was a huge change. It meant that the model could actually be used, and all because they had the auto date time flag on and didn't flag something as a calendar table. So, it's kind of useful. In Excel, we can actually tell you which of these components are actually used and not, so you actually know which items you can actually cut out of your model. In Power BI, we can't. I haven't plumbed that logic through because I'm more focused on the Excel side. But again, this can be a handy tool to suddenly just very quickly go back and get your model memory usage stats. On a high-level geeky note, if you're interested, we actually give you access to the TM schema DMVs. So if you want to go and start writing your own reports around different things to figure out what's going on, let me see here. Let's look at table storages. I don't know. Let's see if that one actually works. Yeah, there we go. So we can actually run this back. Now, I'm not going to go and do any work on this kind of thing here because honestly, this is really, really advanced stuff. But if you're interested in actually playing around with these, if you know what DMVs are and you're looking for, different components to try and analyze things on your own, you can absolutely do that. We do show the TM schema and the Discover. So, if you're looking for those particular items, they are actually listed in here and you can write your own custom SQL queries to query these and actually bring back tables there. Like I say, that's a high-end developer kind of thing to be dealing with. But again, this is all pulling from the Power BI file itself. It's not even pulling from an Excel model at all. The final thing that I want to show you with this one here before I sort of move back into the Excel world is this one. I'm going to go to Import Export. And like I said, the majority of the work that I do is in Excel. It is really, really easy for me to go to Power BI and import an Excel file to Power BI. It is not as easy to say, hey, I've got a Power BI file, but I actually need it in Excel for some reason. So Monkey Tools does this. I can actually go and say, let's import LP Azure SQL, the PBIX file, back into Power Query or back into Excel. And it has identified here that there is a particular table that was actually generated by DAX, not by Power Query, so we can't import that. But we will offer to say, hey, would you like me to generate that missing table with Power Query? Do you want me to add some error handling protection to your data model queries in case they don't load with any data so that you actually have still your column so it doesn't break your relationships? We can import the queries, the model, or everything. And I'm just actually going to run this right now. So what you're seeing right here is that we can actually go and import that. So for models that are in Power BI, they can't be imported to Microsoft Excel. However, models Excel can be imported to Power BI, correct. How do you manage to get the model out of Power BI to model Microsoft Excel? Sure, I'm doing it right now. What you're watching is me extracting all of the queries from Power BI, and it is going to be creating these queries inside Excel. Once it's done with those and the tables have loaded, then we're going to go and we're actually going to create all the relationships and the measures. The things that I can't do on this, though, I cannot hide columns on your tables. There's no API to do that. Here come all the measures. Boom, there we go. And just like that, look, here's all my queries. And if you want to, we can go and say, let's go to pivots and filters from data model. That looks just fine right there. So let's go and put our month names. This will actually show you one of the things I can't do as well, actually. Let me find my metrics table here and let me put my sales on there. Now, I've got a relationship maybe needed error on this one, and there's a reason for this. There's a very good reason for this, actually, and I'll even show you how to debug it in just a second. But one of the things that you will notice is that all of my month names are in alphabetical order. And this is one of the components that I cannot do. And what you see here is we actually tell you, look, we couldn't import metrics because it was a DAX table, but we created an empty table with Power Query for that. There are some columns that need to be hidden in the data model. We couldn't do that for you. We don't have a method to do it. Microsoft hasn't given us one. I have been begging for 10 years to get this, and they still haven't given it to me. Likewise, we can't create our sorting hierarchies, and this drives me a little bit crazy as well. But we give you a hit list of the things that you need to do, okay? So from here, you can actually go and say, let's hop into the data model, Let's go over here and find, oh, actually, sorry, not diagram view right now. I don't want to do that. Let's go back to data view. Let's go find my calendar table and recreate the sorting hierarchy that it actually told me that I needed to do. I'm surprised it doesn't actually have this one. So I'm thinking that this actually isn't in my Power BI model. But here we go. I'm going to go sort this by our month number. And once we've done so, if we go back, we can actually have our pivot table sorted correctly here. Now, one of the things that you will notice here is that we've got a relationship between tables may be needed error. And I know there's a lot of people look and go, oh yeah, it's just one of those errors that comes up. I'm going to ignore it and whatnot. But I actually have a tool to help you debug this and fix this. It's called PivotSleuth. And when you go and you look at PivotSleuth, it will actually go and analyze it. And it says, look, your calendar month name doesn't have a relationship and can't filter this particular table. And it'll actually give you some information around some of these things to fix it. This one here, when we mouse over it, tells us that it's a disconnected table. Now, I'm going to click on this to make sure that the stuff stays around. But it says, look, your measures are probably calculating right. And they are. But this is always going to cause this particular message up the top here. So we can actually fix this by hiding every unaggregated column on the table. So let's go do it. This is our metrics table right here. There is one column. It is a measures table. If I right click and hide this from client tools and go back to Excel, the message goes away and everything works perfectly. Okay, so what PivotSleuth is all about is helping you diagnose why that message comes up and also tell you about potential things that might cause you issues in future. Okay, so it's a really, really useful tool in the grand scheme of things. So what version of Monkey Tools allows you to import models from Power BI to Excel? There is only one version of Monkey Tools, the version. What license do you need? Now, that's a different question. You need a pro license to be able to do that, although it does actually work in a pro trial. There is only one thing that does not fully work in a pro trial for Monkey Tools, and that is the model summary report that you saw over here. This guy here, we actually suppress every other row. My feeling is that if you are going through and using Monkey Tools to generate documentation, there's a darn good reason you're doing this for a business reason. So at that point, you can help me with the development costs on that one. So it's not exorbitant though. Honestly, the price for an annual license is $100 US a year, 99 actually, just under usually the threshold for expensing. And you can actually get it on a monthly basis if you want to try it as well and opt in and out. So, all right, let me just grab that one there. So this is kind of an interesting little component here on what we can do with some of these pieces here. And I think I'm not aware of any other tool on the planet that can actually go and import from a Power BI model back to Excel. Keep in mind, there are some things today that we cannot bring over. Calculated tables. Excel doesn't understand them. We've got calculation groups. Excel doesn't understand what those are either. I'll tell you what we can't bring over. That's the concept for it. So, if you can't bring everything over, we'll do the best we can, and we'll tell you about what didn't come. Okay. So, anyway, hopefully that makes some sense and looks interesting and inspiring. I got to be honest, I don't generally have to bring them back to myself a lot because I usually start in Excel. But you know what? Sometimes you need to, right? And it's just the way it goes. Let me show you just a couple of tools to go the other way on some different things, because I think this could also be useful and interesting. So I'm going to close down my Power BI instance. I'm going to show you a awesome. Thanks, Jack. I appreciate that. Love it. All right, let me show you a cool little thing here. So this is I have 3 tables that I have in my Excel workbook, and I want to build a data model out of these things. Now, the general process for this thing, if we go and we take a look at this, is we go and we right click on our table, we go and get data, we bring it into Power Query, we then reference it a couple of times, we load some of those queries to the data model, some of them not, and then we rinse and repeat for the other 3 tables. So I'm going to show you a nice little feature here that we have, which is called Table Monkey. And Table Monkey scans your workbook for tables and named ranges, and it comes back and it said, look, I found a categories table. I found a table called Table 1. Oh, what a horrible name. Where's that? Let's click on this. Okay, Table 1 appears to be the blue table here. So I'm just going to fix this. We're going to right click and we're going to call this budgets. And what you can see here, if I go to table design, is this has now been renamed to budgets. That's the way it should be. So I can rename the table right in the interface. And what this is giving me now is it says, okay, you got categories, budgets, and sales. We got 3 tables. We're going to create 2 levels of staging queries because I prefer staging queries for my data to break things up. This is my E for extract, T for transform, L for load, okay? And I'm going to hit create. Now, you can make custom prefaces, decrease the number of layers. You can exclude certain tables. You can say, hey, I don't want this one loaded to the data model. There's options in here. But for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say create. The manual job to go through and do what this is about to do here is probably about a 2 to 3 minute process. We're done. It took 7 seconds. Okay, so I always prefer 7 seconds over 3 minutes. But there we go. We got all our staging layers all set up and ready to go. We just make one small change to my options. There we go. Okay, the next thing that I'm missing from here, I got sales, I got budgets, I got categories. What I don't have is a calendar table. I wish I could do this for Power BI. Absolutely wish I could. But again, I can't write queries to them. So we got this thing called Calendar Monkey. Creating calendar tables follows a recipe pattern. I teach it in all of my boot camps because it's super, super important. But here's the cool thing here is that I can actually automate the process for you. So I'm going to create a 12-month calendar. I'm actually going to set this up for a non-standard year end. I'm going to go with a September 30th year end because that's what my corporate year end is. You can create multiple calendars if you want, but this one here, I'm going to call it calendar because I'm super creative. I'm going to load it to the data model, and I'm going to make this go from the earliest date that's ever going to happen in my data. So I'm going to pick up the staging sales table, and I'm going to use the date column. And I always budget before sales happens. Of course I do. So I'm going to use the staging budget table because my budgets are always going to be in advance of sales. Okay. So what this will do is this is going to create us a calendar that actually runs from the earliest date in the sales table, and it's going to get the fiscal year end start for that, to the latest date in the budgets table and grab the fiscal year end for that. I'm going to hit next, and it's going to let me pick the columns that I actually want. Fiscal year, I don't need quarter fiscal year. Month of fiscal year is important though. Month name in short format. Oh, you know what? Maybe I want day name in short format as well, and probably day of week for sorting. So there we go. We're going to hit next, and it says, would you like to create relationships between your tables? And I say, yeah, I'm going to relate it to budgets and sales, and I'm going to hit create. And what you can see now is it's created a start date query and an end date query, and it's loaded 1,096 rows into the calendar, and it's told me what I can't do. I can't set up your sorting field for you, and I can't hide the field on the many side of the relationship. Desperately wish I could, but basically what we're saying is we need you to do this. We're going to grab month short, sort by the fiscal or month of fiscal year, and we'll grab day short, and we're going to sort by the day of week. Okay. All right, so we set that up, and then the other sort of, recommended best practice as we do these things is to say, let's hide the field on the many side of the relationship. There we go, and hide this one here. Now, my table monkey doesn't know about relationships between fields, so I'm going to go and create those ones here. We'll get those guys done as well. So we'll hide those and hide those. And then you can see I've got a couple of mount columns. I need to create proper measures because nobody likes to use implicit measures. Ooh, those are ugly. So let's go and create some measures. So I'm going to use my measure monkey. I have 2 of these. The basic explicit measure monkey will allow you to pick a column like amount, and it will write the basic DAX formula. It gives you some smart choices around what you're allowed to do here. So if we went and picked category, for example, you can't sum category or average it or standard deviation it because it's text. I'm not allowing you to do that. But you can count non-blank values or blank rows or all rows or distinct values. That will let you do. In this case, if I need amount though, generally it's going to default to sum. Gives it the Microsoft default to sum of amount. You can name it here, ask you where you want to store it, lets you change your formats, and it shows you the DAX formulas right here. Implicit function, great question. I'll show you in just a second. All right, I would prefer, in my case, to do this one, multiple explicit measures. What we do is we look for linked fact tables. So fact tables are the ones that we're going to be aggregating values from. You can also toggle this to show disconnected or measure tables only if you want to do that. And there's a few other different options here, but I'm going to hit next. And what you'll see is that it comes back and it says, okay, we've identified 2 columns which we think make sense for us to aggregate here. And in this particular case, we've got a conflict between these because my budgets table and my sales table both have amounts columns. So I'm going to go and rename this one. I'm going to call this budget, well, let's call it budget dollars. I'm going to set this up to be a currency with parenthesis and no decimal values. I'm going to store it on budgets. This one I'm going to call sales dollars. And we're also going to make this one be a currency as well and store that on sales. I'm also going to add another aggregation just for fun here. I get to pick the columns from the table or the actual table name itself. There's only one aggregation that makes sense for a table, and that is to count the number of rows. So this is my transactions. And there's going to be a whole number. I'm going to hit create, and boom, there they go, they're done. All right. So with all that in place, I'm now at a state where I can go and say, let's go build a pivot table. So let's build a pivot table. Let's go and put our calendar. Let's put fiscal year on rows, and then let's put our month short here. You'll notice my fiscal year. Remember, it starts in, it ends September 30th, goes from October 1st. So at this point, this is how it's actually sorting. That's the way I wanted to see it. So that's great. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and throw my sales measure on there. There we are. I'm going to throw my budget measure on there. Awesome. And maybe I'll throw transactions on there. So I've been able to create a lot of things very, very quickly using Monkey tools here. And you can see that our fiscal years are breaking nicely. Even though my calendar data actually starts on January 1st, this all fits as part of fiscal 2018. Fiscal 2019 starts in October, runs through September, and then 2020 starts in October, runs through December. All right, now, the question about implicit values. So these are what we call explicit measures. Okay, what an explicit measure is one that is defined with the DAX formula language. An implicit measure is where we actually just drag a column and stick it into the values area of the pivot table, and it writes something like count of, sum of, or whatnot. This is an implicit value. I hate these with a passion. Okay, in my opinion, they're lazy, and the reality is that they don't promote reuse. Every time I put one of these on, I've got to go and I've got to put my own measure formatting on them. People change the names of them. I can't necessarily figure out what they are. So the best thing to do with an implicit measure is take it off and actually go and write a proper aggregation for them. This also exposes us to the ability now to start doing more complicated things, right? So, you know, this is a very, very basic measure, but if I needed to go and actually now start wrapping this in a calculate or something like that, I can actually do that. You will notice though, my implicit measure is still showing up, even though I took it off the table. And this is because when you add an implicit measure and then remove it, it does not delete it from the model. It sticks around. So if you ever send me a file and I look at it and I go, I can see exactly what mistakes you made. You accidentally grabbed day short and dropped it into your pivot table. Oops, you took it away, but you left it behind. So this is a good indicator actually, and I can even see this, I believe. Let's go and run this in a model summary. So if I go and look at my my measures here, we have a count of days short, which is on a dimension. It has an implicit measure that is not used. So I can actually find exactly what was going on here. And if I want to go and fix this, I can go back into Power Pivot. As some of my students know, you must keep the Advanced tab showing for this. And then when you click the Show Implicit Measures, it'll actually pop up in the table so we can find it. And that's how we actually go and delete it. Okay, they're hidden, which is just kind of irritating. Like I say, I don't like them. The advantages of explicit measures is that we get to define our own number formats, we get to define our own names for them, and you know, when we use one in one place, we know that it's giving us the same value across the board. When you're using implicit measures, it's a little bit more muddy on that because people change the names. It might not represent what's really there, and you can't just reuse the same implicit measure all over the place. Every time you create it, it's going to do something. Well, it builds an implicit measure that is implicit for that particular area. All right. So, and we've gone through, you know, some of the great features on the Monkey Tools set here. Some cool things that we can look at with PivotSleuth is, say, this is a good health check on my model, 5 fields, everything's white. I'm really happy to see that. No colors in this area. Are you adding a column to a pivot table when creating a measure? That's kind of a hard question to answer. No, I mean, when I add a measure to the pivot table, it puts the correct items on the pivot table. So depending on, let's say that I go and add class, for example, to my columns, this is going to add multiple columns to my pivot table. I think what you're asking is, does it add a column inside the data table inside the model? So if I go back here, for example, does it add something in this area here? And the answer is no, it doesn't. It actually adds a measure signature that shows up down in the bottom. And that's synonymous to, hang on a second, what we see with these guys here. This is a measure pattern that we actually have in place. So when you add an implicit measure, it adds one of those into the table, but it hides it by default so you can't see it. What you're talking about is calculated columns, I think, in this particular part here. And if you add calculated columns, well, there's a lot of reasons not to do that as well. They carry weight in the model, and if you're just aggregating columns, it's a bad idea. I mean, come to a boot camp. I'll teach you all the reasons why we don't do that, but too much to discuss in a short piece right now. Henry, standard basic pivot table usage are all implicit measures. They're not all implicit. 99% of measures are implicit in a standard pivot table. The ones that aren't are when you go into your pivot table analyze and you go to fields, item sets, and you create a calculated field. That one is actually an explicit piece that you define yourself, but you're not doing it with the DAX language, right? You're doing it with the MDX language that's native to the old pivot table style. What else can I show you on Monkey Tools really quickly before I wrap this up for today? There's probably only one other feature I think that everybody sort of loves to see, and that is the time sleuth. So I'll quickly drop out of this one here and show you a neat little tool on this one. So let me come back and find this one here. This is a tool that will allow you to get an idea as to how long it takes to run queries inside your Excel workbook. In order to run this, there are two things that there's actually three things that need to happen. And I'm going to be pushing an update into this tool to actually force some awareness on this first part of it. But the first part is, before you run your time sleuth on your Monkey Tools or on your Excel model, you must do a full refresh first. And the reason being is because we need you to deal with things like privacy issues, logging into your data sources and things like that. Once we've actually got a full refresh in place, then Monkey Tools can actually deal with things. Most of the time, because you're working on your own files, it's not usually an issue, but it's when you pick up a brand new workbook and you're trying to deal with it, that can actually kind of mess some things up. I'm going to go into Time Sleuth right now. And I'm just going to open up this user interface, and you can see that we actually pull open the query pane with all of these different components. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and time a standard refresh right now. So the standard refresh here is effectively the same as going and pressing data refresh all. Okay, or if you're on the Monkey Tools tab, we stole the data refresh all button right here as well. And you can see that it's actually running through and doing a refresh in this point. And it's got 3 of the queries active. It's going to pick up the next couple in a second here. And this will tell you approximately how long it takes to actually go through and deal with this, providing that there's no privacy issues and anything that need to be dealt with, which is, like I say, one of the reasons why I need to add some extra wording into this thing to let you know about that. So I'm just going to wait for this, and it always takes longer than I want it to, particularly when I'm actually demonstrating over Teams. So let me give you some of the technical background as to why that actually happens. Power Query, when it does a refresh, can only leverage one single core of your multi-core processor that you have. It does not hyperthread. So the challenge with this is that when Power Query is running on a core, if anything else happens to jump onto that core, like, I don't know, Teams, it can actually have a very serious impact on the load times of what's actually going on. I do have an ignore privacy checkbox. Yes, Stanton, absolutely. And the reason that I have that there is so that we can actually run it without having privacy enabled. This is not something that actually sticks. It's just something for testing. Okay, so you can see that our unbuffered is now actually doing its refresh here, and overall it's telling me that it took 82.17 seconds to do its full refresh. So one of the things that's cool with this one, though, is that we can actually do a little bit more than this. We can go and we can actually select individual queries and say, hey, I want to go and time a detailed refresh on specific queries here. We can also turn off privacy to see what the effects of that are. Or we can say, hey, you know what? I want to go and grab all of my queries and do a detailed refresh. And this will refresh all of them. What people love is this. When you hit chart variation, you can actually go, say, over 5 trials, double them to compare the privacy effect, and it will then go and cook. It will run 5 trials, 5 with privacy active, 5 without, and it'll generate you a nice little chart that looks like this. Okay, so this particular piece here, I'm going to show you, this is the full version of what actually happens inside this file. This is a file which actually has, well, it's got 5 queries in it, and let me just tell you what these things are. This is what we call PQ VLOOKUP. Okay, so it's this one here. It's a custom function. This came from my original book, M is for Data Monkey, where I built a custom function to emulate Excel's VLOOKUP function, because I needed an approximate match pattern that does not exist in Power Query by default. So I built that, and no problem, we released it, and then I got some feedback from people to say it doesn't perform very well. Part of the game that I wanted to play with this as well was, this is the standard version of the function, and if I wanted to go through and build some other component, actually, sorry, I'll come back to what I'm going to say there. I realize I'm off path here, but you know, the other part of this was where we were demoing what happens if you actually use buffering inside Power Query properly. And when you actually look at this one here, this is the buffered version. This is the unbuffered version. So the only difference between these 2 queries, and I can actually show you right away here, unbuffered, the lookup source equals lookup table. The buffered version, the lookup source equals table.buffer lookup table. If you use your table.buffer correctly, you'll notice that it cut the time down significantly. Then my friend came along with another pattern. He said, hey, Ken, I've got this pattern where we can drive an approximate match entirely through the user interface. We don't need your custom function. And I said, hey, I got to check this out and test it. And this is how I use this thing. So I built up an example based on what he sent me, and I tested it. And the user interface driven came much faster. This one's weird though, right? What's going on here? Well, this is user interface driven directly to an Excel table. This is where we choose a load destination of data model. And this one is what happens when we choose table and data model. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take off these. I'm going to focus on just the UI driven stuff here. And what you actually get here in a box and whisker chart, if you're not familiar with these things, is that the bottom of the green box is the first quartile of refreshes. The top of the green box is the third quartile. So everything, 50% of your information is going to fit in the middle here. This is your median result that you actually have in this particular case here. So generally our refreshes, we figure sort of average about this, and then we've got an outlier in this case. The other component that's important around this is that this particular piece, and my charts do better with this right now. I've actually coded this to be a little bit better. So let me just add the chart. Where's my legend? The bottom, there we go. When privacy is on, there is a massive impact on this particular refresh here, not so much on this one. Okay, so it's kind of interesting. So this was an interesting thing just to say that, hey, the load destination changes the effect that we actually see here. But what about the actual queries that I was looking for? This was my version of my buffered PQV lookup function when I refreshed it. This is the version of the approximate match version that my friend sent me. It was driven 100% through the user interface. And when I look at this, I went, wow, this is so much better for a lot of reasons. The biggest one, though, is that with privacy off, there is very little variation. That's why the bar is very, very flat, and it refreshes very, very quickly. And it's way easier to build than a 2-page custom function to make this work. Whereas over here, even with privacy on, there are times when the PQV lookup function might function a little bit faster, but at the end of the day, again, the trade-off is maintainability and what you actually need to do in order to get this all set up. So this is a useful tool for a couple of pieces. Be aware that it is essentially a glorified stopwatch, okay? I'm not digging deep into the hood for deep analysis and metrics. The only queries that we can time are queries that load to a destination. Connection-only queries cannot be evaluated because we can't refresh them. So it has to be loaded to either the table, the data model, or a combination of both. I do not recommend loading to a combination of both. Pick one or the other. But it'll give you an idea as to how long it takes to refresh certain things. And where this becomes really, really useful is when you start looking at really complex workbooks. And this is where I'm just going to end off, as I'm going to show you one very quick demo at the end of this whole thing. This is a very, very complex workbook. This is actually based on the model that put me through my first year of business with consulting. And what you can see here is that we actually ran this. I only ran 3 trials because this took so long to do. But the question was, what is slowing down my data refresh all capability? Well, I think it becomes very obvious at this point in time that it's the forecast query. So I'm not going to spend any time trying to performance tune sector validation because this one's fine. This one is what's killing me. So if I need to try and figure out where to do my perf work, this is going to be it. So I'll go and spend some time there. I wonder why. Well, let's go take a look at this in the query sleuth. Now, this is the query sleuth for this workbook. And if we go look at the forecast query and we look at the dependency chain, you be ready for this? This is the dependency chain for that particular query. It's huge, okay? It's so huge that I wrote this tool to try and figure out when somebody wanted to change something here, what was going to be the ramifications working through my workbook. Because quite frankly, if I go and take a look at this, it really doesn't help me get anywhere because I need to know what's going to happen if I make a change here. And you can see it highlights everything. It doesn't really help me figure out exactly what's going on. Or if I highlight this one, it grabs stuff all over the place. I can't move these boxes around and shake them out or anything like that. I mean, this is like I say, it's great if you got 6 queries. It's useless if you get into higher percentages than that. So kind of a useful little component here in order to be able to run this. Now, to give you an idea of what's actually happening behind the scenes on this one here, if I go to my table of content and look at my model data map, I actually drew this to try and figure out what the interlinkage was of my query. So I did all this manually. Monkey Tools does not do this. But this was basically the idea of trying to trace through and figure out what the linkage was until I built that tool that I could explore things a little bit easier along the way. So a lot of Monkey Tools was built around a real world problem that I was experiencing here to try and figure out, why things were working, why things weren't working, audit them, change them, and build new components on top of them. And on that note, folks, I think I'm probably going to shut it down for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around. I know this isn't the presentation that you were actually expecting to see today, so I appreciate you sticking around to have a little look at this thing. If you are interested in looking at Monkey Tools, I'll show you that you can actually get there. It's monkeytools.ca. That will take you to this website. You'll know if you're in the right place because you got the 5th month from the Cyber Monkey right here. You can actually sign up for a free 2-week trial. You can find that down here, the pro trial. Just get trial now and sign up. Just remember, you only get partial ModelSleuth reports, but everything else there works. I haven't shown you all of the features. There are more. If you are interested in looking at the features overview, there is a feature overview page that is here. There is a knowledge base with all kinds of different support articles and whatnot. And if you really love it, there's even an affiliate program to try and earn some money if you can help sell it to someone else. So hopefully you'll find this this interesting and useful and a little bit eye-opening along the way there. Outside of that, thanks, Stanton. Can't wait till the next impromptu session. I always prefer it when the session goes as planned. But hey, like I say, I really appreciate all of you sticking around to watch and listen and hear what's here. So I will still get this meetup uploaded and recorded within the next 24 to 48 hours. So watch for that. We'll make an adjustment to the description so that we know what's actually happened there, so people who are watching the recording know what they're in for. And outside of that, I hope to see you all at the next meetup. I have a huge amount of faith that Parv will be there to present this for us. And hopefully we'll see you next time. So thanks for coming, folks. We'll see you again.